Well, hey, welcome to Brave. My name is Samuel Laws. I have the honor of serving as our lead pastor. I want to welcome everybody in Dublin, in San Ramon, San Francisco. San Francisco just got new carpet, so it's probably smelling really good over there. Yeah. But hey, today we're in week 2 of the book of Daniel. And we're going to jump into it in a minute, but also I just want to tell you about a couple things coming up. So in the East Bay, we have our Welcome to Brave class happening right after service. And then on July 9th, it's happening in San Francisco. And then next Sunday, we're going to continue in our Daniel series, but I'm going to interview Pastor Darren, who's also my dad, and it's Father's Day. You guys ready for Father's Day? That's going to be great. So we've team taught before, but we've never done an interview, so it could get feisty. Lots to look forward to. Anything can happen. But last week, we started the book of Daniel, and we were in chapter 1, and we talked about what faithful people know about commitment. Because commitment isn't like gray area. It's objective. You can measure the strength of a commitment. It's as clear as like if you said, I'm really strong, and you went to the gym, and then you started lifting some weights, like how much weight is on, your machine or your bar or whatever, like that's not debatable, right? You can lift it or you can't. And so commitment is a lot like that. You're either in or you're out. You're committed or you're not. A strong commitment isn't based on feelings, okay? It might start as a feeling, but it's not sustained by your feelings. And that's how commitment works, okay? And so each week, we've been looking at a different aspect of Daniel and his friends' character that really got them through a very difficult situation. Remember, they've been handpicked, some promising young men that the king wanted to indoctrinate, disciple, and prepare to then serve him and be wise men in his court. And so here they are trying to stay loyal to Yahweh, stay loyal to their God, live out their faith while in a foreign land that didn't believe the way they believed and wasn't really a fan of their God. And so in the same way that commitment will be challenged, will be proven by difficult circumstances, each week we're going to look at a different character trait that will be challenged, that will be difficult. And so today in Daniel 2, we see Daniel and his friends, their lives are at stake. Their very lives are at stake. The pressure to conform is heating up. Israel's been conquered. They're no longer in power. And so they're starting to face some new challenges. And what we see is this week, their ability to be honest is the thing that comes up, okay? So the title of this message is The Strength of an Honest Life. And they're in a situation where it would be very tempting to not be honest. Honesty is a superpower, but it's also a muscle that can be strengthened and needs to be strengthened if we're going to experience the strength of it in our lives. And so first, before we jump into chapter 2, I want to spend some time defining what honesty is. Because we actually, believe it or not, it's not as simple as like just telling the truth. There's more to honesty than you might think. I was talking to my 4-year-old this week, and I told her that she asked me what I did today, and I said, oh, well, I was studying and preparing a teaching. She said, what are you going to talk about? And I said, honesty. She said, Dad, I got it. Tell them to tell the truth and to not lie. I'm like, hey, that's great. We're done. That's all I need to say, really. But there's actually so much more to honesty than just the black and white, the this or that, the simple way that we might approach it. And so I want to start by giving you 3 components of biblical honesty. This is in your notes. If you need a pen, raise your hand. Our ushers will get that to you. But the first is appropriate transparency. Appropriate transparency. Jesus said, whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Honest people walk in the light of life. But what does that mean in our day-to-day with one another? For most of us, we've got to find a balance of what transparency, what appropriate transparency looks like. See, transparency doesn't mean that you just share everything kind of awkwardly. Okay, have you ever hung out with somebody who's kind of an oversharer? Okay, maybe you're that person. You could be really brave right now. You're like, yeah, that's me. Okay, so oversharing, we all know what that's like when you're just like, whoa, I did not need to know that. Okay, turn to the person next to you and say, TMI. TMI, too much information. Okay, this happens. So transparency is not radically just sharing everything all the time with everyone. This is what appropriate transparency is. Appropriate transparency is being honest with the right people and to the right degree. With the right people and to the right degree. My wife and I have learned a lot from each other in this way because we're opposites. Okay, I tend to lean more towards living privately, and she tends to lean more towards living publicly. And so everybody lands in one of these two directions. It'd be really good for you to think about this in your life this week. Like, which direction do I lean? Do I lean to living more privately or more publicly? Because what that'll do when it comes to discernment and kind of finding the healthy middle is it'll help you learn where you need to grow, what your weaknesses are. And so for me, I've had to learn to communicate more, to bring people more along in my inner journey because I can't assume that people know my heart. I can't assume that they know what I'm thinking, okay? And then for Marcy, she's had to develop more of a filter to know who to share what with, because if you're, again, open too much all the time, it's not safe. And so you have to learn who to be safe with and in certain areas and with certain areas of your life. And so you're going to want to consider this. What's the right person and the right degree of information? Like, for example, we're married, so she can look at my phone anytime she wants. I can look at her phone anytime she wants. There's certain conversations, between friends where I know or she knows if that's confidential. But for the most part, we're an open book because that's the right person to have that degree of transparency with, right? Now, would that be normal if like my whole Brave group, if I was like radically transparent with like my, everything on my phone with my whole Brave group or with my coworkers or whatever? Doesn't mean you have anything to hide, but that's an awkward level of transparency. Does that make sense? So some relationships by default, like a marriage, two people becoming one, require a level of transparency that's appropriate. But then when you put that level of transparency in other places, it's not always healthy. So A, appropriate transparency. The next component of honesty is this. B, speak your truth. Proverbs 12:17, it says, whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness utters deceit. Honesty is speaking truth. And part of speaking truth is being honest with how you see things. What's your truth? How do you feel about this? How do you see this? What's your perspective? What do you think about this situation? The truth may not be your truth, your truth may not be the truth, but it's your starting point. It's what you really believe. It's what you think. And until you voice it, you can't begin the process in the conversation of getting to the truth. Because the only way to get to the truth is to start with your truth in a safe place where you can learn. This is one of the reasons it's so important to us as a church that this be a safe place where at any stage in your faith journey or at any age you might be, you can bring your questions. Because maybe you've been in a religious environment or a place where it was very dogmatic and it was like, well, this area is off limits, or I might think this, but then, I might get judged, I might get shunned. But here's the problem with that. If we don't create a place, create an environment, create a culture where you can be honest, where like, say, a young person can be honest about their thoughts and feelings about different issues. If those things don't get talked about, then you get to a point later where there's either a crisis of belief or they abandon their faith because they never had a place to talk to people that were positioned to mentor them, to help them find objective truth. So maybe you know what it's like to be in one of those places, and I hope you know that our heart, we're not going to get it perfect, but our heart is to be a safe place to bring your questions, to bring your truth, and help you get to the truth. Maybe you've had a conflict with someone. You know what it's like where you had an issue or a disagreement, and then you met up to talk about it, and you heard their perspective, you heard the other person's heart, and you went, whoa, I didn't even think about it that way. Or maybe you shared your perspective, and the same thing happened, and it's like all of a sudden, because you were courageous enough to say what you really thought, to put it on the table, to talk about it, you were able to reconcile. And so that's the importance of sharing your truth. On Team Brave, we call this putting truth in the room. Because if we're making decisions and we're processing together, people don't put truth in the room, they don't share what they really think, we're not going to make the best decisions. I'll never forget this one time. I don't know why this happened. It was in the early years of our church, and there was a couple of us making a decision about an event and the time of an event, and it was for kids ministry, and None of us had kids, okay? And we just like made a terrible decision. We put it like at the wrong time. We weren't thinking about like naps and all this stuff. And then, a mom told us like, hey, this is like not going to work. Like, and this is, you should do it at this time, right? But imagine, right, if that person was in the room, what a better decision we would have made. But if that woman was in the room and she didn't speak up or say anything, it wouldn't have helped us at all. So we need each other to share our honest perspectives, because that's one of the ways that we become better together. Marcy and I, we had a family meeting recently, like where we just needed to get some stuff on the table. Have you guys ever had a family meeting? Maybe it was like terrible, maybe it was awesome, I don't know. But we had a family meeting. It was one of those, and I really wasn't looking forward to it. It was one of those days where it's like, we need to talk later. And whenever it's we need to talk, you never know. So I wasn't looking forward to it because there was just this mounting tension, because she has, we have a newborn and she's the only one that can feed it. It's not on a bottle yet, and losing lots of sleep and craziness, and that's a really hard season to be in. And then on the flip side, I was like just, a lot going on at work, but then also trying to just keep the other three alive. So I'm like feeding them breakfast, getting them ready for school, drop-offs, pickups, dinner, bedtime, all that stuff. And so I was pretty tired too. And the thing is, we didn't have like the same standards, okay, in certain areas. Like she had different expectations, one of them being their hair. I just didn't do it. And so they had crazy hair, and they went to school with crazy hair. And that didn't really bother me that much, but it bothered her. And then another one was like how they dressed. So like I thought it was cool to let them pick out their clothes, and apparently it wasn't. So like we have a photo, like I just kind of let them roll in their, toddler style, and they were really happy about it. I mean, they thought it was the best. But and Marcy thought it was cute once, but not like every day, And so then this other thing, and it only happened once, but one time I did like bath time, but I called it like a rinse. Like it was just a quick one, and I didn't use soap and shampoo. But I swear, like one time. But you know how when you do something one time, they just think you do it all the time, right? So she's like, they smell like wet puppies. Like this is unacceptable. I'm like, babe, I'm sorry. But here's the thing. The point is this. For the betterment of our family, our marriage, our relationship, for everybody involved, we needed to have some honest conversations. We needed to put some truth on the table so that we could get on the same page. And so when we did this, honestly, we went from like a couple weeks where it was like we're kind of like drifting like this to right back together. Have you ever had that experience with somebody you care about, where it's just like we finally talked about it, and it's like, man, why didn't we do this sooner? This would have been so much better. This is the power of hard truth conversations. They can unify us as a unit, get you back headed in the same direction with a better understanding of one another, which leads to this last component. Okay, so A, appropriate transparency. B, speak your truth. And C, value the truth. You got to value the truth. John 8:32 says, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. This is talking about the truth of God. But in any situation where you find truth, where the truth is brought to light, there's freedom. There's so much value. But if you don't see the value in truth, you won't get the benefit, the strength of an honest life. One of the ways you know that someone values truth is how open they are to being wrong, how easy it is for them to be wrong about something, because they want the right answer, the best outcome. They want the team to win more than they want to be right. Have you ever been in a meeting with someone, maybe you were arguing about something, and it was kind of like the whole room saw it differently, and there was just something that they were missing? Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes that's because the person is more locked into the outcome of being right than getting to the truth, than getting to the right answer. When we don't value truth, we rationalize, we lie to ourselves, we make excuses, we downplay really important things. And what you need to understand is this actually weakens our lives. When we avoid truth, or we're not willing to fight for it or have those conversations or get to the bottom of it, our entire lives are weakened because we don't make the best decisions. We don't say things grounded in reality. We're not rooted in truth. Now, alternatively, When we value truth, an honest person has moral authority because they know I am who I say I am. An honest person has greater confidence because their life is consistent. And an honest person has increased energy because they're not always having to think like, well, what did I say to this person and what did I say to this person and does it line up? So the strength of an honest life is it takes our entire lives to a higher level. And when this happens, even the people around us start to notice. So let's go to our passage. Let's go to the book of Daniel and see what it has to say in chapter 2 about the strength of an honest life. And this is a long passage, so I'm gonna paraphrase or tell some of the story, but then we're gonna highlight some key verses. So let's start in verse 1. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. And when they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king, may the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. Now, he said this because he wanted them to be honest with him. He wanted the truth. Either you can help me or you can't. Then he said, but if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more they replied, let the king tell his servants the dream and we will interpret it. Then the king answered, I am certain that you are trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I've firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret it for me. The astrologers answered the king, there is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. So they got their truth in the room. They're finally honest. They're like, we can't tell you your dream. We don't know what your dream is. You got to tell us. Verse 12, this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. So Daniel and his friends, they're part of this group now. They were loyal to Yahweh, but this was the group that they had been being trained and developed, this wise men group that's going to consult the king. And so they're lumped in like there's an order for their death. So what does Daniel do? When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Turn to the person next to you and say, that's a brave move. That's a brave move. Okay, the next few verses, they tell us that Daniel went home. He explained what happened to his friends. He's like, guys, we got a little bit of time, but we got to pray. Like, we got to ask God to speak to us, to help us out here. Our lives are at stake. And so that's what they did. They huddled up and they just started praying. They just started asking God for mercy, asking God to help them. Tell us this dream. Tell us the interpretation. This is our only shot. And this is what happened. Verse 19. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. And so then Daniel praised the God of heaven. One of the strengths of an honest life is this. Number one, honesty leads to divine perspective. Honesty leads to divine perspective. Remember, last week, it looked like God had stopped being Israel's deliverer. You know, he let their nation be conquered. They're no longer rulers of their promised land. But then here they are, and they're in trouble. And God's servants, they turn to him, and he's showing that, hey, I'm still for you. I'm still for you. I've always been for you. And now that you trust me, I'm going to help you. God chooses to reveal his mysteries to his servants. This divine perspective, this dream and this interpretation, and all of this was flowing from the same God that no matter how great King Nebuchadnezzar is, has the power to throw down kings and to raise them up. God is the ultimate source of truth, and he's the only one that can give us divine perspective. So how does he make his truth known? In the book of Daniel, it happens through dreams. And so Daniel, he's got to figure out this dream. But did he just figure it out? No, God showed him, right? It's not like he was so smart and he just kind of had a hunch that, oh, the king said this, so I'm going to connect some dots and figure out his dream. It wasn't because he took some acid and all of a sudden he had this revelation, okay? He didn't have his own dream. He didn't drink some special tea and now he figured it out. No, God gave Daniel divine perspective. Have you ever been stuck and you couldn't figure something out and you needed an answer, and then you turned to God and he revealed it to you and he showed you what to do? If your heart is to honestly seek God in a matter, God is for you and God will help you. He may not reveal the answer in the moment. It might be a journey, it might be a process, but God is here to guide us. And that's what he promises. And when God is your guide, you see things, you hear things, you know things that only God could show you. And so that's the power of having a divine perspective. Talk about the strength of an honest life. A divine perspective is a game changer because you are not navigating this life alone. So if you need guidance right now, if you're trying to make a big decision, turn to God and ask him for help. See what happens. We talk about it every week, that our prayer team is available. And you've heard us say that a million times. If you've been coming here, it's every week we say prayer is available. Well, this is that moment, the strength of a community that prays together. If you're dealing with something, if you're going through something, if you're trying to figure something out, don't take that for granted, that in every room, at the end of every service, we would love to pray with you. And I love that this great victory in Daniel, that the revelation that they needed from God, that it came through a praying community. It wasn't just Daniel. It was a group of people that came together and said, God, we need you. The next thing honesty does, number 2, is honesty requires us to risk rejection. To risk rejection. Daniel had no idea what was going to happen when he went to the king. Okay, he had confidence, but it was still a risk because God spoke to him, but what if the king didn't like the interpretation of his dream? What if it upset him? Imagine you're Daniel. Even if God's spoken to you and you have a lot of reason to be all right, I'm ready to do this. But imagine you're walking in and you know that this is a moment that is life and death for you and an entire community of wise men, and it's on your shoulders. You're feeling the weight of it. It's heavy. So Daniel goes in and he tells the king his dream, and then he interprets it. And the first thing that he points out is the failure of the enchanters and the astrologers. He's these guys couldn't help you, but my God can. Daniel wants to make it really clear that his God is the ultimate God. And then he explains the king's dream in showing him what's going to happen in the days to come. So the next 14 verses is the whole dream and that Daniel shares, and then the interpretation, and it's really an amazing passage. I'm not going to read the whole thing for the sake of time, but here's what's going on. Basically, King Nebuchadnezzar is represented by an image in this dream, a head, as the greatest king, the king of kings on earth as a human. And so the vision shows him when his kingdom eventually falls, what's going to follow is less and less impressive human regimes. From Babylon, Persia, to Greece, then to Rome, and all of these were inferior to Nebuchadnezzar because Nebuchadnezzar was a centralized power. He was an absolute monarch. And so what happened is with each of these new kingdoms, the power became spread out more and more. And then what this eventually leads to in the vision, everything gets shattered and turned to dust. Okay, and so we might think, well, maybe that's just at the end, everything's just going to get destroyed. But that's not what the dream was talking about. And then we could also think, well, maybe it's just everything finally gets so broken down that it all just kind of works out. Now, it's been thousands of years. Has that happened? No. Okay, so what this vision is actually talking about is the inbreaking kingdom of God that is the only solution, the only righteous reign that this planet will ever know. And so this is a lot of truth to put in the room with the current King of Kings, the ruler of the world. And so this king, like in the moment, he didn't understand what all this meant, and neither did Daniel. Daniel, he didn't try to analyze the whole thing. He didn't second guess it. He just spoke honestly what God showed him. And this is a huge moment. Remember, it's life and death. Most of us won't find ourselves in situations where being honest means life or death. But let me ask you something. Has being honest in a relationship created a risk for you recently? It could be a risk in a friendship, a marriage, a career. At some point, honesty requires a risk. Think of an opinion, for example, an opinion that you hold that some of the people around you don't know that you hold. Now think about this. What is keeping you from sharing that opinion? At the end of the day, almost always, it comes down to fear. Fear of rejection, fear of losing an opportunity, fear of losing an important relationship, fear of a conflict. Most of us have never been more uncomfortable than we are now talking about politics, unless we know that someone shares the same view that we have. Now, is it a good idea to go around just offending everyone for the sake of like, I'm an honest person, I'm so honest, I'll say whatever, I'll tell you all my political views all the time, right? No, okay? But what if it's more loving to have hard conversations with people you care about than avoid them? Honesty is a risk worth taking. But respectful disagreement is the key. See, the key word respectful, the moment that your honesty feels like it's disrespecting the view or another person, the moment that happens, your motive is questioned. And you no longer appear to or come across as somebody who cares, as somebody who's for someone else. And so this is really important. But these super loving, courageous conversations do so much good for those around us. If you want to grow in this kind of honesty, so in your notes, it says 3 ways to grow in honesty. We don't have time to go through all of these because, I can't fit 9 points in this message, okay? But this week, we're going to release a conversation talking about these 3 ways to grow. And so this isn't like a commercial. It's just the best way I knew to do it and fit all this in, okay? So this week on YouTube, you can go on there and check it out. This isn't some strategy to grow our YouTube channel, okay? We're talking about honesty, so maybe that's oversharing, I don't know. But I'm just saying, if you want to grow in this area, if you want to grow with us, then that's going to be a conversation that you're going to want to watch. So let's review. Number 1, honesty leads to divine perspective. Number 2, honesty requires us to risk rejection. And lastly, Daniel was brave. Daniel was honest. Daniel took a risk. How did that pan out? What did Nebuchadnezzar say? Let's take a look. Verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel, paid him honor, and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position, lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon, placed him in charge of all the wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as administrators over the province of Babylon, and while Daniel himself remained in the royal court. So Daniel, he got huge rewards, but he also got a new position, a really significant one. Why did the king do this? Well, Daniel had the king's trust. Number 3, honesty builds trust with people. Honesty builds trust with people. Daniel was promoted to a high office. The king trusted Daniel because he was able to deliver in a way that no one else could. And that created trust. Daniel made sure that his friends were promoted. I love that. His friends were part of the victory. They helped. They prayed with him. So then they're rewarded too. When honesty and righteousness and coming before God leads to a big win, everyone in the community wins. Everybody around him won. They all got promoted. And so what we learn from this is that trust is the currency of relationships. Trust is the currency of relationships. The opposite of trust is distrust, which leads to suspicion. Imagine with me for a moment, okay? Think of a person that you have a low trust relationship with. And what's that relationship like? How does it make you feel? Maybe this is a coworker, a roommate, a friend. Let me ask you, what's this relationship like? How does the communication flow? Is it quick? Is it free? Or do you find yourself having to constantly second guess yourself, say everything just the right way because there's landmines and you might step on them, things might blow up? Are you guys able to work really well together, make decisions, accomplish things quickly? Or does everything just take more effort than it should? Does this relationship give you life? Do you enjoy it? Is it fun? Or does it make your life harder? And is it draining? The bottom line is when you don't have trust, you can feel it. Which is why honesty in a relationship is so important, because nothing feels good when trust is low. Think about how great communication flows when you just really trust someone. When you can say the wrong thing in front of them and just know that they know what you mean, right? In a low trust relationship, you can be so specific and so careful and still be misunderstood. It takes a lot of effort. So here's what we need to know is there is a cost to every low trust relationship that we allow in our lives. Low trust relationships are expensive. They take a toll on your life. In fact, here's a quick grid. Here's the economics of trust, okay? Low trust equals a low speed and a high cost. Low trust, low speed, things go slow, and they cost you a lot. High trust, on the other hand, things go fast, and they cost you less. High trust, high speed, they cost you less. For example, after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, before that, you used to be able to just show up at the airport 30 minutes before your flight, hop on a plane. I don't remember this. I was in middle school, but that's what I hear. Now, my whole life is taking 90 minutes, right? You have to get there early. You have to take off your shoes, pull out your laptop, go through security checks. Everything costs you. It costs you time. It costs you effort, energy. The airports, it costs them in extra security, technology. All airports are now a low-trust environment. Maybe you've worked in a low-trust environment. It can be stressful, right? And so without honesty, without getting the truth in the room, you cannot have a high-trust environment, high-trust relationships, okay? So whether you realize it or not, you're paying a price for every low-trust relationship that you're in. Maybe you're in a relationship right now and you feel this, you resonate with this. You're like, there's not a lot of trust. It could be with your parents, it could be with your boss, a friend, someone you're dating, it could be your spouse. If you want to increase trust, if you want the relationship to flow again, you've got to grow in honesty, because honesty is essential for every healthy relationship. Honesty builds trust with people. So as we close, maybe you're here today and you're just realizing for the first time that the problems and the pain points of your life right now are connected to this, that you need to grow into being a more honest person. Remember, honesty, it's not as simple as just, do you tell the truth or are you a liar, right? It's valuing truth. It's seeking truth. It's speaking your truth. It's being a person that pursues continuity in their life, being consistent. Maybe for some of you, for the first time, you're seeing the connection to how a lack of honesty has been sapping your energy and sapping the potential of your life. Maybe you're not sure how to move forward. Maybe it feels like there's a mountain in front of where you are and where you want to be. Listen, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to figure this out on your own. You're not alone. You can turn to a God who is more than able. Like the song we sang, that he is more than able. Who am I to deny what the Lord can do? God can handle the problems of our lives. Nothing you're facing is too big of a gap for him to overcome. If you turn to God, if you ask him for help, He's not going to let you down. If you bow your heads and join me, I want to pray, and then I want to share one more thought before we move into a time of worship. But first, if you're here today and you have yet to make a decision to begin a relationship with God, but today you've got just enough trust. Maybe you've got a lot of trust, or maybe you've got a little, but you're at a point where you're ready to say, you know what, God, I want to begin a relationship with you. And it's a step of faith. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have all your questions answered. But if you're at that place today, I want to pray for you. I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand and agree with this prayer. Just go ahead and raise up your hand. This is just me, you, and your campus pastors. Agree with this prayer as I pray it, if you raise your hand. Dear Jesus, today I trust you. Today I honestly recognize that I need you and the life I want, the future I want, the forgiveness of my sins, the eternity that I can spend with you. I'm ready to acknowledge that. I'm ready to say yes to you. In Jesus' name, amen. You know, one of the most interesting things in this whole story that really, I think, is just so cool and also really challenges me personally is what Daniel and his friends did right after God answered their prayers. I mean, you think about it, like God answered their prayers, and what did they do? They started praising God. But keep this in mind, like God told them the dream, gave Daniel the interpretation, but he hadn't gone to the king yet. He still didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, what if the king's like, nope, that's not my dream? Or what if the king's like, I don't like that dream, you're dead, right? The outcome hadn't yet happened, and they started praising. Our level of faith is often seen by how long it takes us to start praising God after he speaks. If we won't praise him until we've seen the outcome, until the game is over, until we've found the win, where's the faith in that? Listen, there's been so many times in my life where God has spoken to me, and I've written it down, or he's spoken to me through others, or even just given me a word or a promise for myself, for our family, for our church. And I'm going to be honest, my response has not always been to praise. Sometimes my response is, well, that'd be really cool. We'll see if that happens, right? Like, wouldn't that be awesome? But when you praise, you receive the promise and you solidify it in your heart. You say, you know what, God, I'm going to receive that promise. I'm going to receive what you're saying to me, and I'm going to start to get it in my heart to the point where I'm going to start living as if that's true, where I'm going to start thinking as if that's true, where I'm going to start speaking as if this is true, because you are the God of truth. Amen? So today what we're going to do as we close, maybe there's something God's promised you. Maybe there's something that's been spoken over you. Maybe it hasn't happened yet. Have you praised him yet? Have you praised God in faith? So we're going to stand and we're going to sing this song about our God who is more than able, and we're going to declare in faith the things that God has spoken over our lives. Amen.